I do. Thomas Callahan, Callahan. You're welcome. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Depending upon who you ask, I've been recently elected the chair of the planning board, so condolences or congratulations are in order. I'll let you decide which ones. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the planning board in terms of the report that we provided to the council. I do have 3 slides that have been prepared and are available to be shown if it is your inclination to let that happen. Okay, can I have the slides called up, please? Thank you. So this first slide is simply a very brief history of how we got to tonight. In December 2023, the last town council approved changes to the zoning ordinance that basically established a 15% change to the dimensional regulations within the zoning ordinance in response to state legislation that had been passed that session. And last March, the town council referred a package of proposed revisions to the planning board that included reverting back to the 2023 dimensional regulations that had been in place. In May of last year, the council opened a public hearing and then referred the package of revisions and then withdrew the referral with the understanding that individual work sessions would be held with the planning board on each of the proposals that had been, each of the, I think were 13 or 14 proposals that were sent along at that point in time. In August, the town council and the planning board held a work session to discuss the zoning section 4.3, the definition of households, and the 15% modification to the dimensional regulations. In November, the town council referred amendments to the ordinance regarding the elimination of the minimum side yard setback and the reversal of the 15% dimensional regulation amendments from 2023. And then finally, the planning board met twice in December on the 16th and the 22nd and provided the report that is before you tonight. Next slide, please. So, as you know, the guidance that the planning board operates under is that we are obliged to make a recommendation to the council on either to recommend that the amendments that are being proposed are consistent with the comprehensive plan, as well as consistent with the purposes of the zoning ordinance. And we only have the opportunity to vote up or down. We can't redline or we can't amend what you suggest, but we do have the opportunity, and we did take the opportunity this time around to provide some additional suggestions or ideas for your consideration. So there are, as Council of acknowledged, instances where this planning board found that the dimensional regulations could be supported in the following areas, in terms of the definition of building coverage, and then what I'll say the non-residential, if you will, dimensional regulations for the business and industrial site coverage, for the Galilee Special Planning District, for the residential development and the residential developments planning special planning district, the dimensional table for accessory height, which I believe is 15 feet, dimensional table for business and industrial, accessory structure height, text revision to include the definition of greater than 18 feet in height, industrial setbacks, convalescent homes, group homes, orphanages, motels, stores, courts, cluster developments, and multifamily. Heart of the matter, as it's been discussed over the course of the last couple of years, goes to the residential side of things. The board could not come to a consensus to recommend the following aspects of the proposed referral based on the inability to make findings that they were consistent with the comprehensive plan and that they were consistent with the principles of the purposes of zoning. And that was the elimination of the minimum side yard setback, the residential site coverage maximum, the Breakwater Village amendments, and I'll make a notation there. When we spoke to the representatives from Breakwater Village, which I think originally there had been some indication that came from the council, I think from Councilor Colonies, that the folks at Breakwater Village were looking for something different than they had. They were looking to be free from the special zoning, status that they have. The representatives, including the president and their attorney, said they would prefer to remain as they are, but asked if their shed setbacks off the side yard setbacks could be set at a little shorter distance than they currently are. The dimensional table amendments for residential, the FAR, and the hardscape and softscape amendments. So before I go to the last slide, just a couple of additional comments. There are areas of substantial agreement on the non-residential side of the recommendations that you've made. And I'd like to say that there were a couple of aspects about this that I would suggest that you find and ask for answers tonight because we couldn't get them. Number one, Mr. Menzies, I think you had raised the question last time out about FAR and noted that I think you used the word wrinkles, if I'm not mistaken. There might be some wrinkles in terms of how the changes in the dimensional table might interplay with FAR. And we had asked and raised that question with our council. Over the course of a couple of meetings, we have not gotten a response, and I think that's something that this council should get from their council, which I understand Mr. Callahan might be prepared to do that tonight, but I recommend that you do that. The second is there was a provision in your referral that would have added language to section part 2, section 4.5E, related to maximum lot coverage. Again, we asked our counsel because no one on the board understood exactly what the intention of that language was, what its consequences would be if it was enacted. We were unable to get an answer from counsel. Counsel was not prepared to opine. I sent a note on to Bob Craven today, teeing these two questions up, and hopefully Mr. Callahan will be prepared to deal with them tonight. There had been some, I guess the last big picture item I'll refer to before we go to the last slide, is there had been some discussion about folks who had, what I'll say, had incurred an opportunity cost, that by essentially paring back the table of dimensional regulations in 2023, people who would have had the opportunity to expand their property more so than they would now, even under the 15% modification. There was a counter argument that had been made that I don't know that you have heard, but I think it's worth considering as you go forward, is the flip side of that is there is the potential imposition on the ability of people to essentially have the quiet enjoyment and use of their property who are abutting those people who want to expand their property right up to the property line or close to the property line and next to them. I'll say that the table of dimensional regulations, it's my understanding the table of dimensional regulations in Narragansett has been in place for 30 or 40 years. People have come to rely on that as basically what governs how people can do, what people can do not only on their own property, but what people living next door to them can do. I'll have the last slide, please. There were some thoughts about what else you might consider as you go forward in terms of potential ideas that were not included in this item. So number one, if the objective is to help people who reside here, own homes here, then to use the homestead exemption, which people who are qualified for the homestead exemption, to provide either additional relief or to fast track or modify the process for somebody who's seeking to make an improvement in their property. The second thing is to weigh more heavily lot size when considering and granting relief to substandard lots of record. If you look at the one of the charts that for the and I'm sorry I don't have it right in front of me, but the table is tied to relief to the actual lot size and not necessarily to the zone. So if you look at FAR, if you look at the table of relief for FAR, that's tied to actual lot size, and that's important in terms of thinking about in the real world how big is a lot, not what zone it sits in, but how big is the lot, and thinking about how much relief we can grant. I think we have an example in our report. I'll just refer to it briefly. It's interesting to note that, and sometimes you get the inverse of what you would expect to get. So for example, using the existing table in section 6.4 for calculating building coverage limitations for a legally created substandard lot of record of 9,000 square feet yields maximum building coverage of 1,530 square feet in an R80 zone, but 2,178 square feet in an R10 zone, thereby enabling 40% more coverage in the more densely developed zones that are less densely developed than the less densely developed ones. On its face, it seems counterintuitive that you could do that. Finally, I will say, one of the things that I think we've heard throughout this is how challenging it can be for individual residents to manage their development process as they go forward. So I'll say we suggested that the council explore expending the resources, to determine the scope and potentially expend the resources necessary to recodify the zoning ordinance. So in the zoning ordinance, just in one of the sections that we're talking about tonight, the following language appears: maximum site coverage, maximum building coverage, maximum lot coverage, building coverage, net lot coverage, and net lot area. I don't know about all of you, but the ability to follow that through the ordinance, or through the zoning ordinance, is very challenging. That's only one section. Again, it's been my understanding that the mid-90s was when the last time the zoning ordinance was looked at holistically and basically recodified. For the purposes of making this easier for people to do the improvements on their homes that you mentioned, it would probably be worth your time to do that. Finally, I think others will speak to this tonight, but I think you'll find that you've made significant changes over the course of the last year. Garages, basements, cellars are all now excluded from the FAR calculations. You've got the 15% modification. I think if you look carefully and you take the time to look carefully what's happened over the course of the last year, how many variances were actually sought, how many were granted, you might find that this could be tailored even further as you go forward. So, Mr. President, that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have or your colleagues might have, and
I appreciate it. Oh, sorry.
And leave the podium.
I appreciate it, and I do congratulate you on the newly elected position. It is a thankless position to serve in any voluntary capacity or elected position, so I do wish you all the best in that new role. I do want to say thank you for providing the very thorough report, as all members of the planning board have continued to do every time they come here in a very professional way. And I do agree with the questions that you would ask that we follow up with our solicitor, and I've already made note to ask them when we have gotten to that point in the meeting. Does anyone else have any specific questions or comments?
Congratulations, Tom, and I just think it's it's a breath of fresh air for you from the planning board to come up here and say that the zoning ordinance is confusing as a member and as an educated person who built buildings and oversaw construction. It's confusing to us, but it shouldn't be confusing to the people that need to do things. So I think this council would be appreciative of maybe some kind of vote by the planning board to move on with a recodification and make it simple. I've gone through different zoning ordinances in different towns since this has all started, and a lot of them are really simple and easy to understand. And this is just a compilation of years of restrictive ordinances on top of restrictions, So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just, again, the report was unanimous. The findings were split on the residential side. It was a 3-2 vote on the residential side. The findings on the first bucket were all unanimous. I'd be remiss if I did not thank the staff. As thankless as this is for us, they've been through this now at least a half dozen times over the course of the last couple of years. The work that goes into preparing something like this is extraordinary, and I'm grateful to the staff for the work that they do. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much.